Continuing the Alfיים Shana, Kdama Torah L'Olam, that the Rebbe said on the second day of Shavuos Tafshin Yud Aleph. The Maimer is speaking about the greatness of Torah. In fact, what we're going to learn in the Maimer is even more than that. Not only the greatness of Torah on its own, but how the highest and the greatest achievement of Torah is Torah the way it comes down here into the physical world. Now, in order to start that, so we started with the Maimer Azal, with what it's brought down in the Medrash, that Alfיים Shana Kdama Torah L'Olam, the Torah preceded the world by 2,000 years. And the question that the Frierdiker Rebbe asks in his Maimer, which is also in various other Mamorim of Chassidus, that how can you say that the Torah came 2,000 years before the world? Before the world, there's no time at all. And the Rebbe explained, in explaining the question, that there's different ways of looking at the meaning of there's no time. There could be no time because practically there's no time, because we don't have the tools by which to measure time. We can go even a step further, that not only there isn't the tools by which to measure time, but since there is nothing that exists in the world, there is no existence, so even if there was a passage of time, it doesn't make a difference, because time, the passage of time, only makes a difference as a result of how it affects the world, but there's no world that it's affecting. Then there's something even deeper, and that's the idea that there was no time at all, because time is a creation. And perhaps what the Rebbe is bringing out over here is the greatness of how it's totally beyond. We can't even measure Torah by the measurements of time and say that the greatness of Torah is in a concept of time, because of these three reasons, until the final one, that the whole idea of time didn't exist, which means Torah is so beyond the whole idea of the world, it can't even be measured by things with which we measure the world, not only because we don't have the measurement to measure it, because it doesn't exist. Bringing out the greatness of Torah, and the greatness of Torah is the essence of Hashem, as something which is connected to Hashem. And when we're coming to talk about Shavuos, receiving the Torah, and we're preparing for Shavuos, and we want to know what the Torah is, the Torah is not just something which is higher than the world. The Torah is something which is on a totally different realm. It's a spiritual realm in which the whole world and the whole concept even of time and space don't exist at all. And the explanation that the Frierdiker Rebbe says in his Maimer is that what is the meaning of Alfיים Shana Kdama Torah L'Olam? We don't mean time, because there is no idea of time. Rather, we mean 2,000 years, 2,000 levels. Or even deeper than that, not just the 2,000 levels, but in the level of the world, and in the level of Torah. What is Torah? Torah is from the level of Alfיים, which is Kdama L'Olam. What's Alfיים? 2 times Aleph, which is Alefcha Chachma, Alefcha Bina. Aleph is from the word I will teach you. Alefcha Chachma, I will teach you Chachma, wisdom. And Alefcha Bina, I will teach you understanding. Meaning that Torah comes from the concept and the level of understanding, which is above Kdama, before, meaning above and beyond the whole idea of the world. Why is that? Because the world, the physical world, or even the spiritual worlds that we deal with, they come from the level of midos. It says in the pasuk, "Ki sheishes yamim asa havaya es hashamayim v'es haaretz." And Chassidus explains, what's the meaning of the word sheishes yamim asa havaya? Hashem made 6 days. It should say, B'sheishes yamim asa havaya. Hashem created the world in 6 days. And the meaning of Sheishes yamim asa havaya is in order to create the heaven above and the earth below. Even the heaven above, there first was Sheishes yamim asa havaya. Hashem created 6 days, meaning 6 midos. 6 midos, 6 channels of light, 6 midos from the word measured, 6 measured channels of energy that Hashem channels into the physical existence, and they are the limited amounts of godly energy that creates the world. That's the midas, and that is the essence. That is the source of everything that we have, both physical and spiritual. It's limited. It's limited by the fact that it's midas. Let's understand this another little bit, a step further. Let's look at a person. In a person, there's moichen and midas. There's intellect and emotions. The difference in a person between intellect and emotions, a person's emotions are for someone else. You can't love if there's no one to love. There's the famous example that's brought in Chassidus about this. When Avraham Avinu didn't have any guests, he felt a need for guests. It pained him that he didn't have guests, he didn't have who to be kind to, because Avraham was chesed, he was kindness. The nature of kindness is it needs someone to whom to feel kindness. Now, how did Avraham have then a feeling of kindness, of a want for kindness, even if there was nobody there to be kind to? That also shows that the feeling expressed itself on the fact that he has a need to be kind to somebody. Since other people exist in the world, therefore he wants to be kind to them. If there was no one existing in the world to be kind to, there wouldn't be the idea of kindness to whom to be kind to. In a person, the idea of love. When I love someone. I love a different person. Hate, fear, etc. Those are all levels which are limited to another person, to dealing with someone else. That's all the idea of midas. What about moichin? Intellect. A person doesn't understand things for someone else. Understanding isn't relating to someone else. I understand a concept for myself in order to understand it. And this is the two ideas of moichin and midas. And it's the same thing. So when it's in a person, the midas are the emotions that deal with another. They're the way a person relates to others. The moichin is something which a person relates within himself to something which brings him more completion. Now, what does that mean? Firstly, in the midas, in the godly midas that with which Hashem created the world, the sheishes yamim asa havaya, the 6 channels that Hashem created and then gave them into the world. That means that Hashem created and brought about something which will give to another entity, which will make there be another entity. That's the midas. That's the idea of the midas. So these sheishes yamim, which come into both shamayim and haaretz, is the way that Hashem gives to another existence. Whereas moichin, chachma and bina is something which a person has within themselves. Now, as regards to Hashem doesn't need chachma and bina. Hashem doesn't need in himself the levels of chachma and bina, the light of chachma and bina. So why then do we say that chachma and bina is for himself? If there's no world, if there's nothing else, what's the idea of it being for himself? So the way the Rebbe explains it is that it's true. The very fact that there is something, even if it's chachma and bina, means that it's something which relates, which is there in order for there to be a world. But even in the order of the way it's given in the world, first he brings out the light within himself, and then he transfers it and continues it on into the world. So the difference between Torah and the world, when we say Alpayim Shana, Kadma Torah La'olam, what do we mean? That the Torah supersedes the world, supersedes the whole concept of the world, even the spiritual worlds, because all of those come from midas. all of those are an existence which is outside of Hashem, whereas what Torah is the existence of something which is within Hashem himself. Alpayim, twice Aleph. Aleph chachachma and Aleph chabina. It's something which is above the whole concept of world, of separation, of a separate entity. It's something which is totally united and one and included in Hashem himself. So now we have the greatness of what Torah is. Besides, for the question that we had, Torah is totally beyond the world. Before there's a world, there was no concept of time. But even as Torah comes into the world, even as Torah is given to us, when we learn Torah, when we connect to Torah, we're connecting to something which is in essence above the world as a world. It's Hashem, as in Hashem himself. So that's saying the greatness of Torah and the Maila and the wonders of Torah is that Torah, when a person learns Torah, becomes one with Hashem. That's all in a very general way. But we have to understand this concept more. Because Torah comes down here to us, and when we learn Torah down here in a physical manner and things that talk about the world, how is it that I'm becoming one with Hashem? Hashem is above the world. Hashem is beyond me. How can I relate and connect to the essence of Hashem that's above the world, to the essence of the Torah? So we're talking about the greatness of Torah as a theoretical thing. It sounds wonderful. But there must be something more and deeper to it. So in order to understand what's deeper in this, so we'll understand by first asking a question. The pasuk that talks about, the pasuk in Mishlei that talks about the greatness and the amazing milas of the Torah, starts with V'eyeh etzloi emun. The Torah says, I was for Hashem an emun. Emun, the simple meaning of the word emun, means a greatness, something which Hashem raised and made great. I was for Hashem something which Hashem invested His greatest powers into. That's what the Torah says. And I was something which Hashem took pleasure in. And I was a pleasure for Hashem day and day. Now the day and day is what the Gemara explained as meaning 2,000 years, that a day of Hashem is 1,000 years, and therefore the Torah is 2,000 years, 2 days, which means above, and this is what Chassid is explaining, that means the intellect, the essence of godliness, which is above the world. So now, the Rebbe asks a question. Why, when we talk about the greatness of the Torah, when the Chazal over here want to speak about and want to express the greatness of the Torah, it starts by saying, the fact that the Torah is above the world, it's above the whole essence of the world, because you have the Yom Yom, the 2,000 years, which is the concept of intellect. The Rebbe says, but why do we start with that? That's the last thing in the pasuk. It's not the last thing. There's more things in the pasuk which in Mitzvah Hashem we're going to learn in the coming times. But it's something which is further on in the pasuk. Start from the first thing of the pasuk. Start from the greatest concept of Torah, the fact that the fact that Torah is the greatness in which Hashem invests His greatness. Explain that to tell us how great Torah is. Why should we speak about something further on, something that only goes on later when it deals already with Yom Yom, which means that there's already a world. There's a day, and there's a concept of time in which we're going above. In other words, the way the Torah is above the world. Speak about the greatness of Torah on its own. And so in order to understand this, so the Rebbe first goes through a few ideas, which we'll do in Mitzvah Hashem tomorrow, of perhaps Emun is a lower level, and then the Rebbe explains, no, Emun is actually the highest level. But what the Rebbe is going to explain in the Maimer is that in order for us to understand and appreciate the greatness of Torah, not only that, the real and ultimate greatness of Torah is not in the highest levels of Torah, the way Torah is above the world. The way Torah is above the world is something that doesn't relate to us at all. The true greatness of Torah and the true essence of Hashem that's appreciated in Torah, which will help us also appreciate how we connect to Torah in the world, the way that Torah was given down here, specifically is brought out in that yom, in that level of how Torah comes into the world, of how Torah affects the world, and there that the real essence and the true essence of Torah is revealed, as we'll see, Be'ezras Hashem, in the coming times.